Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. The podcast for the leaders and entrepreneurs of today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, John, finish on. Coach Cole.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 304 of the Today's Leader podcast. Now, the feedback that we've been receiving over the last month has been phenomenal. Now, we've had guests like Randy Herbertson, Tom Beekbane, and Stephen Van Belleghem. It's been 100% positive, and it's refreshing to hear the value that we bring to leaders right around the world. So thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you for sharing the podcast. It really is bringing in multiples of new people into the podcast. And we thank you immensely because our aim is simply to add value to the leaders of today and to help them prepare for success for tomorrow. Now, today's show is again a brilliant conversation. Stacey Ashley is a high-performance leadership and coaching expert. With over 30 years' experience, Stacey has helped thousands to develop their leadership competence, confidence, and credibility. She's the author of 3 number-one best-selling books on Amazon on leadership, including the newly released Show Up 21. Stacey has 4 international Stevie Awards, including Coach of the Year 2019, has been nominated for Telstra Business and Women's Awards 9 times. And in 2018, she was named in the Global LinkedIn Top Voices. Now, that's a great resume. Stacey is obsessed with leading possibility, and today she shares that obsession with the listeners of the Today's Leader podcast. And as per normal, after a word from our sponsor, please welcome Stacey Ashley.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast, I have Stacey Ashley. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm really, really happy to be here.
This is actually a little bit of a first for me because often I'll talk with leaders all around the world, but you're an Aussie. You're a fellow Aussie.
That's right. So we can have a bit of a talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be on a nice time zone for once. Often when I'm interviewing people from the States, it's at some either ungodly early hour or some ungodly late hour. So tell us a little bit about the Stacey Ashley story.
Sure. So I started my corporate career in accounting, and I quickly discovered that that is probably not something I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life, and so I moved quite quickly into leadership and led a lot of really significant change and transformation programs of work. And what I discovered is, as part of that process, there weren't a lot of leaders that I really could learn from. And so that started to lead me into my own practice. And so for the last 15 years or so, I've been really working with organisations and their leaders to give them that foundation leadership toolkit, which I think just makes leadership life easier. And so that's what I love to do now. And I continue to kind of grow and explore and help leaders every way that I can.
Absolutely. So when you were saying there wasn't a large number of leaders that you could learn from, what specifically were you looking for in that growth that you were chasing or looking, investigating? What were some of the things that were missing in that development, in that coaching aspects?
Well, I personally never had a coach in my entire corporate career, so that was a missing piece. I think what it was, and I guess it's only in the last 15 years since I've gone out on my own, what I've realised is that most leaders they don't get support to develop that additional skill set on top of their technical or their domain expertise, that sort of thing. And so because of that, they don't then impart that leadership skill set and approach and knowing and being to the next group of leaders. And so I think the gap for me was that I recognized that there were some people who did things quite well as leaders and there were some people that maybe didn't. But there was no deliberateness, I guess, about actually fostering leaders that were emerging, that were coming up, and getting them to really think about what I describe as the practice of leadership. And so for me, I didn't know which were the particular skills that I needed necessarily. I kind of got some ideas, but I didn't know exactly. And also I didn't have a way of perhaps trying them out and then reflecting on it and getting feedback and then taking that information and the insights from that and then, and building on it over time so that I could actually elevate my own practice. And so I just feel like even today, that's a really big gap. We sort of think that, or it seems that in many organisations, certainly not all, but in many organisations, that people get promoted into some kind of a leadership role and then again and again and again. And there's this assumption that they simply know what to do.
Yeah. So what do you put that down to, that the development thing? Is that because I've experienced that as well, and I see that in some of the work that I do, that the mentors, internal mentors, what I would call an internal mentor within an organisation, may not necessarily be the best internal mentor. They've got their own things that they're dealing with. They're very focused on their own career progression and often don't put in the time needed or required to get their people to the level that they should be. So what do you put that down to, Stacey?
I think there's a couple of things. So the first one is that nobody probably showed them, so they may not even realise that that's a responsibility that they have to actually develop, the next crew that are coming through. So I think there's kind of just a recognition gap that actually, as a leader, I have a really clear responsibility to do this. The second thing is that because no one showed them how, they actually don't necessarily have the skills to then be able to pass on that development. And I think the third one is that there isn't, in that recognition piece, there isn't, I guess, an understanding that if I don't put some time and effort and focus into developing that next group, that in fact it's going to impact me, because I'm going to keep getting dragged down to the level of the people that I'm working with, rather than us all progressing, and elevating and making a bigger difference and all the things that leaders, want to do. So I think those would be the three things.
And that's a really cool insight, to be honest, because often the leader becomes the go-to person or the problem solver. And when you spend your time and invest in the people from a development sense, a lot of those problems, they don't necessarily disappear. They're just handled differently. The team take on, they know their guidelines, they know the framework in which to make a decision, and a lot of those empowered decisions start to free the leader up to be more effective in what it is that they do. I've got a bit of a saying, and I know it's very hypothetical, but we develop the team we want from the team that we have. And it really is about that investment back into our team and being able to spend some quality time with them, not just around business KPIs, goals, turnover targets, etc., etc. It's really about, so what is some of the skill set that I can help you with, or where can you get some better help or some stronger help? So I'm really resonating with what it is that you've talked about. And so now I just want to, you've written a couple of books. So your first book, I believe, is First Lead Yourself, but you've written a book for 2021, and I love that, because I think 2020 taught us a lot of things about not just ourselves, but about the organisations that we work for. And the book is called Show Up 21. Have I got that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book.
Well, I think lots of reasons. We all know 2020 was, different as years go, and for lots of reasons. Obviously there was a global pandemic, and then there was lots of consequences and impacts and kind of knock-on effects due to that. And what I noticed, obviously, talking to lots of leaders, working in lots of different organizations and industries, there was a variety of ways that sort of showed up in leadership and in leaders. And what I noticed is that in the second half of 2020, there were some really consistent patterns and themes around, I guess, fatigue because of the long-term having to step up and give generously as a leader and that sort of thing. That was one big theme. And another one was loss of connection because, for so many reasons we were keeping our distance, from each other. And so leaders and their teams and that sort of thing lost connection, not because of anything they did or didn't do in particular, just because of circumstances. And so I spoke at a big conference at the end of the year, and what I spoke about talked to those themes. And I just got such an overwhelming response. I thought, wow, this is really important. And then I had this really important conversation with a mentor of mine in January, and she said, Stacey, you've written a couple of books now. You don't always have to write a big book, And I was like, oh my gosh. And everything fell into place. And I was like, you know what? I've got a few little things that I want to share with leaders to help them to create a way of continuing to go forward, to continuing to be able to support themselves so that they can keep giving generously, because let's face it, 2020 was a single year, and I call 2020 the sprint of leadership, but 2021 is the beginning of the marathon of leading change and transformation. And that means we've got a lot of ground to cover over the coming years. And as leaders, we need to be equipped and supported and resourced and energized and all those great things to be able to be our best and to continue to lead. And so the purpose of the book was giving people some really simple, practical ways to look after themselves and to be their best as leaders from 2021 going forward.
Yeah, and looking at the book and looking obviously at that first book of First Lead Yourself, you've got a real strong focus on self-leadership. And so when I look into there's 5 principles behind Show Up 21. Do you want to give us a bit of a broad overview without being the giving it all away?
Sure. So the 5 principles are really about making sure that you fill your own cup, that you do actually focus on yourself to make sure that you do have the right kind of energy, that you're doing the right sort of things to sustain yourself over the long term. I talked about the connection piece. So there's a principle around, being quite deliberate and fostering connection, because as humans, we need that. That does help to bring out our best. And then I picked up a couple of principles because I did a lot of research about leadership during emergency and crisis and that sort of thing last year. And a couple of things really shone through, which I think when I combine that with my experience as a productivity and performance consultant, it just makes sense. And one of them is that it's very easy, and you sort of talked about it, leaders can get called into the detail. They can get called into come and help us with this problem and fix this and that sort of thing. Whereas what leaders really need to be doing is to be focusing on the things that make a difference, the really high impact. And they have to have absolute clarity about, focus on that and that alone, not all of the busy work and the noise, just really make a difference. So that's a theme. Being quite deliberate in building your own capability. And that's for 2 reasons. One, so you've got the capability, but also so you've got the confidence. I can do this. I can lead through this. No, we haven't seen it before, but I believe in myself because I've got this breadth of capacity and capability that I can actually do this. And then finally, of course, it's such an important thing is to play to your strengths, get into your zone so that things are not hard. They flow and they're easier. So that's the final principle.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm always appreciative of is many people will talk to me about why should I develop leadership skills. And one of the things that you just talked about is one of the key things that I talk about. It gives us all confidence. As you develop your skills, and especially those skills of connections and building relationships and, even that ability to prioritize and be really focused in on what is most important for you as a leader. But confidence to do that just makes a huge difference. And if we're not practicing, or we don't have our little sandbox where we can practice some of our leadership skills to see the benefit in the process of putting them all together, we're not going to get that confidence. Because once again, you can read a book and think, yeah, that makes sense. But if you aren't safe in a role where you can potentially work through some of that, you're not going to build that confidence of having, the tough conversations. How many leaders shy away from tough conversations? Because at the end of the day, we wouldn't call them tough conversations if they weren't tough. So confidence of leadership is actually a really strong point. And can we hone in on principle 5, your zone of genius? So walk me through that, because I think we've all got our zone of genius. Sometimes we just don't see it.
Yeah. This one came up from years of work, and in particular, I had a particular conversation with someone I was coaching. And so the story, if I can tell it really quickly, is that he had been very clever guy working with a really leading edge organization, relatively young in his role, and he had been chosen by the CEO to participate in an international working group, and he was just completely flummoxed as to why, and he just couldn't. And he was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what my role is. I think the CEO's made a mistake. And anyway, so the conversation progressed, and he said, so I said, tell me about the task force. And he said, well, what it is, it's an international agricultural aid project in Indonesia. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. And he said, but, let's be honest, I don't know anything about agriculture. I've never worked on an aid project, and I haven't been to Indonesia. So, I don't understand. Why am I involved? And so I asked him 3 questions that kind of turned into the zone of genius. And the first thing that I asked him was, what do you know? And he said, oh, gosh, I know lots of things, but, my PhD is in systems innovation. And I went, okay, great. And of course, he knew a whole lot of other stuff. And then I said, what do you love? What do you love to do? And he said, I really enjoy and get a lot out of bringing people together that have really diverse skills and forming them into a group that can do something amazing, and really deliver something that hasn't been done before. And then I said, okay, so now think about this task force. How can you contribute? And the penny just, it dropped. And all of a sudden he realized he wasn't there to be the expert in aid or agriculture or anything. He was there to basically bring it together and make it happen. And so that was his zone of genius in that particular, topic. And so over the years, I've used those 3 questions to help people to identify the difference that they can make in their way. So it's something that is they really contribute, but it's in an energizing way. And so I think that's such an important thing. I mean, I can be an accountant because I'm qualified as one, but it doesn't really energize me, and I don't do my best work. So for me, the zone of genius is taking your great skills and what you love and get achievement and satisfaction from, and applying it in a way that you make your contribution, but it is actually in support of what you do best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so that sounds fascinating. So where can people grab that copy of that book at the moment? Where have you got it available?
Sure. So it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
And they can also get it from my website, particularly if you're in Australia. You can grab it off the website. But those are the two main things. So my website's staceyashley.com.
There it is. Now, another one of the things that I know that you're really quite strong about, or it's part of your focus as a coach, is using a coaching approach in your leadership. Walk me through that. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, so when I talk about leaders working with their tribe or their people, there are 3 core components. There's mentoring, sharing your wisdom. There's modeling, showing what leadership actually looks like and talks like and walks like. And then there's coaching, which is about a few things. It's about tapping into people's knowledge and initiative, but it's also about shifting accountability from you to them for their particular portfolio. So that, as you said, you as the leader are not solving everybody else's problem. You're not the font of all knowledge, because then you just become a bottleneck. You know, and basically you're the cap or the limit on your team's capability and capacity. Whereas if you use a coaching approach, you kind of let go of being the expert in the domain and become the expert as the leader. And that coaching approach is about drawing out all of that amazing, experience and strengths and ideas and initiative and everything that your entire team and peers and stakeholders and everybody have. So that it's not just about a capability and capacity of one being you, it's you tapping into everything. And I think what I've noticed when I work with leaders and I help them to kind of build their coaching skills and become use more of a coaching approach in their leadership is it's an incredible relief, because they don't need to know the answer to everything.
Absolutely. And a good coach always knows the right questions, or even sometimes they may not know the right questions, but somehow the ability to ask questions really does bring out that conversation. I mean, I'm a John Maxwell leadership coach, and John always, of course, he wrote the book, Great Leaders or Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, but one of his greatest things that he shares is that he's never failed to learn something new whenever he's asked a question. When he's told someone what to do, he's never learned something new. So it's really, really critical. And I think that ability, and the reason why I honed in on that, because I've been talking with my clients about, some of those 5 critical skills that we need, especially in 2021 more than ever. And I believe a great leader should be a great coach and have that ability to ask great questions, be curious, and listen for the response. And I, so many leaders understand that a coaching approach can actually really help them in the feedback process. So a lot of leaders get that real pit in the stomach feeling when they've got to give someone some feedback. But when they can start a feedback session with a question and get the other person's thoughts or inputs into it, all of a sudden they're having a conversation. It's not necessarily a feedback process. So a lot of people feel comfortable with that. So I really enjoyed your explanation of that, because once again, it's just something that I 100% agree with. So how do you use what your thoughts are, whether it's with the books around self-leadership? How do you use that with your client base?
Okay, so I guess primarily when I'm working one-on-one, it's with very senior leaders, and I typically work to develop coaching skills with leaders at all levels. I think how do I do it? I guess the first thing is to understand, where are they now? Where are they? What are we starting with? What do they understand? What's unclear? What's their portfolio? What are their challenges? So again, just using that coaching approach to really get a sense of where they are and where they want to be, both as leaders, but also in terms of their team and their team's performance, in terms of the business, because we obviously operate in a context. We need to understand that as well. We can't do it in isolation. And those are the 3 core dimensions that I talk about in leadership are self and tribe and world, the world you operate in. And then it's a journey. It's not a okay, let's just do a workshop and we're done. I think there are so many factors that go into evolving and developing leaders that it's not a one size fits all, and it's also not about let's just do this one thing and we've ticked the box. I think it's the first thing for me, and I don't know if you find this yourself, Tony, but I think it's such an important thing for people to opt into the process themselves, to actually choose, do I want to elevate my leadership? And if you do, yes, I want to work with you. But if you're not sure, maybe now it's not the right time, or you haven't kind of understood the importance of it, and that's okay. Maybe we can work together later. So I think it's about opening up people to ideas, and then help facilitating their thinking process with the coaching so that they can make great choices for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that coachability thing. It's when you're working with someone who is an unwilling participant, and unfortunately I've had to work with a number of them who are sometimes unwilling. The company's trying to do the right thing, but sometimes there's people within that organisation that doesn't feel that they need coaching or are looking at coaching in a negative sort of a slant. And that can be really challenging and draining for a coach, because a coach really needs to be working in that energy space where they're providing energy and trying to get energy in conversations, and that can be incredibly challenging. Absolutely. So it would be a perfect world, I would imagine, Stacey, if we always work with people that just wanted to get better, and that would be our sweet spot, I would imagine, if you're speaking on behalf of coaches everywhere. But every now and again we've got to work with someone who may not be a willing partner in the process, and that can be really challenging. So, but that whole concept of looking at self and getting some self-reflection, some true self-reflection, or asking some great questions can really drive that sort of a process within. And I've no doubt that you've got examples where you've been able to turn someone who maybe wasn't necessarily part of the commitment in the initial stage, but after 2 or 3 sessions started looking forward to it for what they were learning. So, so who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
Look, the simple answer is probably my dad, to be honest. He just was a great example of, someone who strived to be a better leader every day. Was very conscious of his responsibility to the people that he had a responsibility for. And so I learned a lot from him. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says or does, but that to me was enormous. And then I had a couple of leaders during my career who were great, not for very long periods of time. In fact, when I reflect on my corporate career, what I look back at and say, I worked for some really lovely people.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there was that many of them that were, truly great leaders in there. They were just really nice people. And they had great intention, which of course is important. Others, there's not anyone that is sort of super well known that I would go that person or that person. Of course, you've got your people like Nelson Mandela and Richard Branson, and all, but they're probably not the people that have inspired me most. It's people who've been close to home. It might be, one of my hockey coaches when I was a teenager, was a really great example of a leader, someone who showed up, who wanted to be better than they had been before, who asked, proactively for feedback, for example, which I hadn't experienced before from a coach, from a hockey coach. And I think the lessons are, we can see people around us and we can go, wow, what they've just done, or, what I've noticed over the last 6 months or something has been amazing. I mean, even if you think about it, this last 12 to, 16 months, 18 months, there's been some incredible examples of, leadership. People really standing up and showing up as leaders. And they don't all have leadership roles. They're just people who have shown up.
I find it interesting that when I'm speaking with great leaders, that often it is those people that are just growing on a daily basis, exhibiting leadership at whether it's local, community, business, organisation or level. And it's very rare that I will see interview someone who says, I'm so inspired by what Mandela did or what Obama did or whoever. It tends to be those people that have had that immense connection with us during our leadership career that we then go on and share. And part of that learning process and giving process for a leader is about taking what we've learnt and helping others see, become aware of that and how they can be better utilising, I guess, some of our learning. So,
absolutely.
So today we've got a bit of a divisive world. It's certainly disruptive. So when we're looking at the concept of leadership, what do you see as, if I was to be a leader today, the concept of the podcast is today's leader. So this is all about today. What are some of those traits that I need to have as a leader to be the leader that I need to be today?
Yeah. I think we've touched on some of them already, Tony. I would say definitely the ability to reflect on myself. And to do that, there'll be some things I really like, and there'll be some things that maybe I'm not as happy with. But just to acknowledge that, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just that, okay, so that's how it is. And what would I like to do to then change it or make it better going forward? So I think that that's the first thing. I think that, again, no surprise, the ability to build relationships, connection, is so important. If I don't have relationships with the people around me, I actually don't get insight into how people are, what's important. Are they engaged? Are they motivated? What do they need? How can I help them? So that's a hugely important thing. I think the ability to ask for help is another really key one. We are, and I think, and I've had a number of these conversations with people, who've been leading organisations that perhaps did really well last year. And they're like, no, everything's great. I'm like, but what you've got to recognise is the world changed, your life changed. Great that your organisation is doing so well, but everyone needs to acknowledge that it was a very different period of time, and it impacted everyone in some way because it was a whole of life impact, not just a work impact. And so recognizing that and knowing when to ask for help. Like I spoke with a leader yesterday. She's done amazing work. And she said, I thought I'd got through it, but I'm actually starting to feel really tired now.
Yeah.
Not last year, now. Now that everything's kind of settling a little bit, I'm feeling tired. And so she said, I'm going to go and, talk to my boss and a few things. So I think the ability to ask for help is incredibly important. And that can be for lots of reasons, because you need access to information or resources, or you need support, or you need a sounding board, or, there's lots of things. What else is important? I think... another one of the really important things, and this comes with the coaching, is when you are the leader, you need to let go of being the expert. It's really hard to do both, be the expert and be the leader. Your job is to grow the expertise of the people around you so that you can trust in them to be able to do a great job, and so you can step up as a leader, and then we all grow. And what else? Gosh, there's so many things, isn't there? I could talk all day about this. Let me think of one more. And then I think the other one is I'm going to go back to zone of genius. Everything that you can do to operate where you do your best stuff, I think is really important.
That sweet spot. You've got to discover it. You've got to be, because that's where we're going to produce our best work and be our best contributors to the team. So... because it's interesting at the moment, I'm seeing a number of businesses reaching out now for leadership coaching and leadership development, because they're suddenly starting to get those coming out jitters, I guess, is part of the way that I would phrase it. But I've also seen some interesting thing with leaders, especially who went from an office environment into a work from home environment. And then, the initial stages of that, I think they all embraced it. I've got to maintain connection. I've got to be doing coffee chats with them, but then I guess the fatigue set in, and then it sort of become, I suppose, part of the established process. But then I've seen some of them try to wrestle back control and become more of a micromanager, and that's been a little bit of a reversion back to type in what I've seen with some of my clients. But then some of them are saying, Tony, now how do I develop my team? I mean, I've got this team that's spread out now, that's no longer working together in an office. and some workplaces have got 50% in the office one day, 50% the next, and leaders are feeling a little bit disjointed in relation to that. Do you have any tips for leaders in that sort of environment? How do we continue to lead in a positive aspect and develop our team when the workplace is fundamentally, well, let's call the term hybrid? There'd be other adjectives and verbs that could probably describe it for some leaders as well, but let's call it a hybrid workplace. Any tips there for leaders wanting to be the best that they can be in that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's so relevant. I think the big thing that I would say is ask. Like, ask your people, what do they actually need? What do they want in terms of support, development, help? Because you can guess and you might be close, but you might not. So I think maintain your approaches in terms of mentoring, modeling, coaching. Keep some of your structures in place in terms of your one-on-ones, your feedback opportunities, those sorts of things. I think they're absolutely critical, particularly when we're remote. Maybe we don't see each other as much and that sort of thing. But I would say ask and really listen. And the other thing I would say is observe. And when I say observe, again, it's about the listening, but it is, listening for the sign, the voice that might be an indication of fatigue or overwhelm or those sorts of things. And then again, go into the ask. I'm sensing or observing such and such. What's happening? What's going on? How can I help? So being there, but not necessarily kind of premeditating what you think they're going to need. I think it's, and so we do have to, as leaders, we do have to develop our observation skills, our listening skills, all of those, and our checking in skills, I think, in a way that's kind of the right amount. We don't want to overdo it. And so setting some routines around that sort of stuff, I think, is actually important. I've talked to a few leaders who are like, oh my gosh, I just feel like I've got to ask everyone this and this and this and this. And I'm like, no, just keep it simple and figure out what do you need to do and how often. And if you have to put, 45 minutes in your diary one day a week to do your check-in calls, do that. Don't try and keep it in your brain because it'll get overwhelmed. So keep it simple, but just recognize what are the important things I need to do and then actually set some time.
Yeah, and once again, if you're a leader and you've built relationships and you know your team, you're going to have a sense of what they need. But by asking those questions, it's also part of that concept you were talking about. Give yourself permission not to be the expert. So every now and again, it's good to just say, well, fundamentally, I think this, but maybe I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
And which is a fantastic thing for a leader to be doing. So, Stacey, tell me about your relationship with failure. And so, and I guess I asked this question in relation to, because so many people feel like they've failed in certain aspects, and then that drives a downward spiral with energy or career or what have you. And failure is sometimes seen as a fatal thing within an organisation. So tell me about your relationship with failure and some of the strategies that you've used.
Yeah, I think I would say when I was younger, I did feel like failure was pretty fatal. I respond really well to, achievement and recognition and all those things. And so if I didn't do well or something didn't work, it was pretty heartfelt. But what I've learned is actually failure is such a teacher. And so now I kind of feel like it's a win. I made progress, I achieved something, whatever, or it's a lesson.
Yeah.
So I don't think about it as failure. It's what did I learn? What can I now take forward? What will I do differently? So the great questions to myself. And so so that's the first thing is failure. What is that? First attempt in learning. I think they teach the kids at school, which I really like for fail. And so take the lesson. That's the first thing, because it likely will create opportunity, and that's important. And then the second thing is, sometimes you don't hit the goal, or you don't meet the target, and can be okay. Particularly, again, put the backdrop of 2020 when the context changed just a little bit. So the goal maybe wasn't really that relevant anymore or not achievable because of the circumstances. So we also need to sometimes, I think, and again, something that I do is it's not only about the goal, it's also about progress. And so I think that that's a really important. So maybe I didn't hit the goal, but I did actually progress in this way.
Yeah.
And so, that is moving me towards the goal or a slightly different goal. And so the goal alone is not the only thing I think that we should be measuring against. I think progress is such an important thing, and I think the learning is an important thing. And then the other thing is, as you said, failure is very rarely fatal. Okay, all right, let's reset. That happened. All right, so where are we now? I have this quote that I reflect on a bit from Arthur Ashe, which is, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can.
Yeah, that's a great quote. And especially a great quote when people feel like they've just fallen over or stumbled or bounced into a wall at full pace, because in today's world with entrepreneurs and startups and the grind and the hustle that everyone's using as a bit of a status symbol in some respects, sometimes these mistakes are happening at full pace, and it does feel like you've just hit the wall, and then as you slowly come back and rest against the floor, I suppose that concept of, okay, starting again and one step in front of each other, I think is a really good, strong message. So leaders are readers. Stacey, you've written a couple of books, you're wanting people to read them, but tell me, what are you reading?
I'm probably listening more at the moment, and to be honest, I'm not doing a huge amount of reading because I'm generating so much content at the moment. But I've been listening to, I get it wrong every time, is Legacy again, which is about the All Blacks and some of their philosophies and culture. That's one of my favourites. I'm also rereading Embraining, which I studied a few years ago, and that's about accessing your multiple brains of head, heart, and gut. And I guess if you're not quite woo woo, I would call it accessing your intuition. Okay. And so that's another one of my kind of favourite reads. And what I really love about it is it's actually highly practical. You could actually just get that book and support yourself in terms of developing your ability to tap into your own intuition.
There's so much interesting stuff out there at the moment in relation to how you can grow and develop yourself, just in terms of books. One of my previous guests was talking about, each and every cell can operate by itself. So, which gives you another slant on, is the brain really the master of everything, or is, so it's really intriguing. And I suppose so many people can, in many ways, get confused about the amount of theories out there. And I always say you grab what you can or what resonates with you within a book, you put it into practice, and you see how it goes. So I've made mention on many times on a podcast, it's very rare for me to read a book cover to cover. Yep. I'll sort of skim read is what it's certainly not speed reading, but it's skim reading. Yeah. But if I see something that's relevant for me at the moment, like, it could be a crucial conversation, it could be I've got a client that's doing this, I'll dive into it. It's like it's that deep-seated research, and then all of a sudden I've got a new concept. So
yeah, I'd agree. My mum used to say to me that, when she bought a recipe book, if she got one great recipe, it was a really good buy. I kind of feel like exactly the same when you're reading a business book or a leadership book. Yeah. You get one great idea or concept from it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. It's I saw a great quote the other day, because I've been doing some workshops with some small business groups out here in Brisbane, and the quotes, because there's so many definitions of leadership, and I think that sort of confuses our field a little bit as well. But everyone's entitled to make up their own. But I read this great quote, and I can't for the life of me think of the person's name at the moment, but it'll come to me. But their quote was fundamentally, to define leadership for yourself, read widely different definitions, then make up your own. So, so I thought, that sounds good to me. So,
Beautiful.
all right. So, Stacey, what's the vision for you going forward?
Yeah, I think my word for this year is activate, and so I've been doing lots of things that support that from a business perspective in terms of working with even more clients and more groups. I'm hoping to write another book maybe early next year to go with the existing three, and then I'm putting together some more programs to complement what we've got. And I guess for me it's always been about putting leadership skills into the hands of as many people as I can, so that we can all elevate our practice, because I think the world needs more leaders who are equipped and confident and capable and have that intention to leave the world a better place than they found it. So
absolutely, it sounds awesome. So out of everything that you've accomplished over the last couple of years, what are you most proud of?
Probably my kids. That would be my number one. I think that last year in particular that we were really, or that I was able to really offer support to so many leaders and organisations who really needed it.
Yeah, and that's a great purpose-driven perspective, isn't it? So, because I know that when COVID hit, for a lot of coaches or facilitators or development people, a lot of their income pretty much, I know in my case, I dropped 70%. There was proposals on the table that suddenly there was something more important. There was face-to-face workshops that obviously needed to be canned. And there was this whole range. So I think being able to jump in and, I can't even recall how many sessions, but I had so many pro bono sessions just to help leaders get through this. It kept me engaged in the process, but it also provided some support. And some of those people are now clients of mine because of that process. So, and that's something that I'm really, really proud of. So
yeah, well done.
This is the soapbox time. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Good question. I think the one thing that I would say is that I do talk to people and they say, oh, but I'm not a leader. And I would say, actually, you are. Even if your focus is leading yourself, you're a leader, if that's the limit of your leadership. But leaders can be program leaders and portfolio leaders and thought leaders. That's not just about leading people. And I think it's such an important thing to recognise that you can and should be a leader of self, and then you can expand from there.
And once again, leading self gives you confidence, and that then resonates and radiates out in everything that we do. So
absolutely.
Once again, great wisdom. So, Stacey, how can people connect with you?
Certainly. So LinkedIn. I'm Stacey Ashley on LinkedIn. So you'll find me there, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. About to start Clubhouse, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes. And my website's staceyashley.com.
Excellent. No worries. And people can buy your books on Amazon and through your website?
Correct.
Excellent. Stacey, it's been a pleasure having you today on the Today's Leader podcast. Thank you very much for investing in today's leaders.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat. I think it's been great. We've covered a lot of ground, and go forth and lead.
Excellent. Wise words to finish. Thanks, Stacey.
Join the group of people impacted by seriously simple stuff to get you unstuck. The first book by Tony Coach Curl. Available at Amazon, Tony's Simple Stuff provides the tool for people to master your life and aspirations. 20% of every book sold supports Carter's cause.
And now, it's time for Tony's 2 cents.
And now it's time for Tony's 2 cents. Stacey spoke about so many great leadership principles and practices during our conversation today. And they're all some amazing insights to help you embrace and develop and continue to strengthen your leadership abilities. But the one that really stood out to me was the thoughts around what she calls the zone of genius. Now, I just loved that, the zone of genius. And you have a zone of genius. I have a zone of genius. We all have a zone of genius. And I really love this idea because we all have these strengths, right? And these strengths, sometimes we underplay our strengths because we're always looking to build our opportunities or to develop our weaknesses. And sometimes it really is about embracing your strengths and continuing to practice your strengths, because that is what provides confidence to us all as leaders. It's the practice of leadership, as Stacey puts it. It's the practice of leadership. Just like so much that we do, the practice must be good for us to get better. So it's just like everything that we do. If we want to get better, we have to practice better. Poor practice won't improve us as a leader. No practice won't improve us as a leader. Great practice will help make you a better leader. And you have to practice those things that resonate with you. So it's not just about reading a book and picking out some key concepts and saying that's made me a better leader. It's about reading a book, picking out those key concepts and putting them into practice by changing something that you already do. And that's when you discover how great you can be as a leader. So thank you, Stacey, for investing in today's leaders. And of course, as always, all of her details are in the show notes. Now is the time for you to take control of your leadership growth in this disruptive world we navigate. Our aim is to help you become the leader you need to be today. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. Our website showcases the podcast and our magazine, and we're pleased to say that our masterminds are now available there as well. And Today's Leader is a collective mindset for the leaders and the entrepreneurs of today, forging the path of success for tomorrow, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Masterminds. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. It's right there on the front page. Don't forget, you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. You know what it is. Just don't be an arsehole. I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.